Breaking news out of Tuscaloosa. 2 days after the surprise retirement of Nick Saban, Alabama's coaching search has come to an end. Former Washington coach Kalen DeBoer is the next head coach in T-Town, taking over one of the most coveted jobs in the sport. Our Mike Rodak of Bama 24/7 is here with more on the hire. Mike, we saw Dan Lanning, Steve Sarkisian, Mike Norvell all confirm their commitments to their respective schools via social media. Their names were tied to this search from the start. So how did Alabama end up going with Kalen DeBoer?
Right. So when this first happened and Nick Saban retired, they told players, give them 72 hours to find a new coach. And this wasn't a situation like Duke basketball where you had a legend in Coach K who already had someone on staff and John Shire. There was nobody on staff that was going to succeed Nick Saban. So they had to go out and look. And like you said, Mike Norvell, Steve Sarkisian, Dan Lanning were all options, and they ended up staying. They ended up getting more money to stay. But then Kalen DeBoer was still high on that list for Alabama, and the coach of the year, several of the major awards, and a coach who has won really wherever he's been. And that's something I think Alabama is looking for, and that's something even going back to Greg Byrne's previous hire as athletic director, his basketball coach, and Nate Oates, a winner. And that's, you look at the record, and 104 and 12 in his career, so almost a 90% winning percentage. That's even higher than Nick Saban, obviously at a lower level for much of that, but someone who comes to Tuscaloosa with a really strong resume.
Yeah, DeBoer resurrected a Huskies program that had gone 4-8 before his arrival. He led them to back-to-back 11 and 14 win seasons, plus the trip to the national title game. What are your initial thoughts and expectations for the hire?
So it's a name where, sometimes SEC fans will see a Pac-12 coach, and I think there's always a little bit of skepticism about someone from that conference going to the SEC, and that's something that he's going to have to overcome. And being someone who's not really from the South and maybe not used to SEC football, I think is something, again, he'll have to adjust to. But it is a coach, like I said, who can bring that resume, that track record of being a winner. He can say that he was just in the national championship game and, was competitive at least against Michigan, and give him some better players, which I think he will have at Alabama. And maybe he can take Alabama further than it got in this past playoff. So I do think there might be an initial letdown among Alabama fans just because whoever's replacing Nick Saban is not going to be Nick Saban. But again, as far as the options that are out there, to get the coach of the year, I think is something that will excite fans eventually.
Saban brought 9 SEC titles, 6 national championships to Tuscaloosa, not to mention the recruiting dominance. So expectations could not be any higher for his successor. What is DeBoer's biggest challenge in living up to Saban's legacy?
Well, the immediate thing is just keeping the players that are on this team. And the transfer portal is open for 30 days after Nick Saban's retirement by NCAA rule. And we already have seen one of those players from Alabama go into the portal in Isaiah Bond, who was the player who caught that 4th and 31 catch in the Iron Bowl. Really their top returning receiver, a very talented player. And, we're reporting he's already going to make a visit to Texas this weekend. So that's something where he's going to have to recruit guys to stay on his team to keep Nick Saban's players in place. He doesn't have to try to be Nick Saban, but obviously you're still going to have to recruit at a pretty high level to be successful in the SEC. And that includes the transfer portal.
So you kind of already got into it with recruiting. You look at the coaching jobs around the country. There's jobs where coaching matters the most. There's jobs where recruiting matters the most. And it's fair to say Alabama is the latter of those. Saban had 10 top-ranked recruiting classes in his 17 seasons at Bama. You look at Washington, you got to scroll down the list of the 2024 rankings. They're currently ranked 36, coming off a championship season. So, Mike, how confident are you in his role as a recruiter?
That is going to be the number one question with him. And it goes back to what I said earlier in terms of he's not from the South. He's from South Dakota originally. He's coached, in Washington, Fresno State as a head coach, and Sioux Falls at the lower level of football. And again, he's been successful, but again, if you're going to be a successful coach in the SEC, you're going to have to go up against Kirby Smart and Steve Sarkisian and some of these really big names in this region that you walk down the street anywhere around here, people will recognize those faces and those names because college football is so important around here. So it's something that he's going to have to adjust to. And going into some of the homes and, Texas and Florida and some of these recruiting hotbeds that the SEC dips into and, again, be able to compete with some of these big names. And like you said, the track record in terms of recruiting has not been there for him at Washington, but perhaps some of the resources that will be available to him at Alabama could help him.
One more follow-up on the recruiting transfer portal conversation, just keeping this roster together in general. That 2023 roster was the highest rated ever in our 24/7 Sports talent composite. You mentioned Isaiah Bond already in the transfer portal. We saw the 5-star verbal commit, Ryan Williams, decommit on Wednesday, the day this news broke. Alabama does NIL a little bit differently. So how does DeBoer keep this roster together? Do they have to change the way they do NIL?
Yeah, we'll have to see exactly how that works. I know Nick Saban's philosophy is make it very equitable, and each player gets a certain share of the money, and then above and beyond that, they can earn, kind of what they deserve. But Alabama, from an NIL standpoint, is not at the level of a Texas and some of the competition that they're facing in the portal. And that's something that I think DeBoer can control to some extent, but that's also something where it's just the fan base and some of the money backers of the university will need to step up to make sure that he can keep some of these players and get some of these players that do go into the portal. But overall, I mean, it's something where I think the portal will be part of it for Kalen DeBoer. But again, it's still recruiting out of high school, kind of building through the draft, as Nick Saban likes to say. And I think priority number one for him will be keeping Julian Sayin, who just enrolled at Alabama as a freshman, keeping him from having any second thoughts after he was recruited by Nick Saban and now has a different coach. Kalen DeBoer does have a background, though, in quarterbacks, and I think that could be an easy sell for him.
All right, so the next head coach is in place. What is Nick Saban's role moving forward?
So he's already moved out of his office. It only took him less than 48 hours to do that. And he's going to get an office in Bryant-Denny Stadium down the street. And he's already said that he can still get on players' butts from there. And so he's still going to be around in Tuscaloosa. Now, he does have this new $17 million beach house down in Florida that has been widely reported about. I'm sure he'll spend a lot of time there. But he's also a creature of habit. He's someone who wants to get up and do the same thing every day and get working. And I think he'll want to be around to some extent with the awareness that you don't want to be around too much. I don't think you want to be overbearing to a new coach and make it look like you're trying to stick around and control things still. So I think he'll be aware of that. I think he's, maybe a couple days a week he shows up and might be around practice or talk to players, but I don't think he's going to have a major active role around this place going forward.
I hope he takes advantage of that beach house. He's definitely earned it. All right, Mike Rodak with the latest on Kalen DeBoer, the new head coach of Alabama football. Thank you for your time and for all your Crimson Tide news. Make sure you check out Bama 24/7. They're actually running a 60% off deal for your VIP membership. Their team over there has you covered on everything from the coaching staff to the transfer portal to recruiting. Head over to Bama247.com.